Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, I am honored to have Joie Cheng as my guest. Joie is the queen of transformational book publishing. She's passionate about people writing their books and publishing them. She loves helping authors. She believes that when we share our stories, we heal ourselves and we heal the world, which I couldn't agree with more. She has great credentials. One of the things that she's done recently that I know about is a TEDx talk, and I hope we can talk about that today. She's author of the best-selling book, The Naked Truth, A Woman's Journey to Self-Love. It's about her personal journey of healing herself naturally from deep depression and suicidal thoughts through self-love. And for those of you who know me, that is near and dear to my heart. Joie is featured author in the international best-selling book being Unapologetic by David DeGorio, and will be featured in the upcoming book series Success Selling is All BS and Excellent Leadership is All BS by Stephen De La Cruz. She's the host of the Naked Truth Movement podcast, where she interviews guests who are willing to share inspiring stories and be vulnerable. She has also been interviewed on over 30 podcasts, including Conscious Millionaire, with millions of listeners all over the world. Welcome, Joie. I can't wait to hear your story, and we can get into it.
Thank you for having me, Art. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Oh, it's great. Tell me how this life journey began, where you were born, and how it all started.
Yeah, how much time do you have, right? No. Well, I was actually born in New York. I was born on Long Island in Stony Brook. So I like to say I'm a New Yorker, but I actually grew up in Chicago. So I'm definitely a Midwest girl. Even though I was raised there, I always felt like I should have been raised in California, in Southern California, which is where I am now in San Diego, because I just love the moderate temperature, the sunshine. Whenever I see sun, it just makes me happy. If I wake up and it's a cloudy day, it definitely affects my energy, my mood. So I feel blessed to finally be living my dream in San Diego.
I lived in San Diego for a number of years in Ocean Beach.
Okay, nice. Yeah. I have literally living the dream right now. I've actually been staying at this oceanfront place off the cliff in Solana Beach. So we just literally get to hear the ocean when we go to bed and wake up to it. And yeah, it's amazing. I'm
jealous. My dream is to have a house in La Jolla overlooking the ocean.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's my dream, is to have a house on the beach as well, overlooking the ocean. I think that's probably a lot of our dreams. I don't know. Probably, I haven't thought, maybe in Encinitas though, or even Hawaii or something. I haven't been very attached to the location, but yeah.
Let's get back to how your story started.
Yeah. So I won't take you too far back, but, basically, in my 20s, I went through years of depression and suicidal thoughts. And at the time, it wasn't like there was anything going on really in my life that would make it seem like I should feel that way. So it wasn't just a sad, empty time in my life, but it was a very confusing time because I didn't understand, why I was feeling that way. I had a good job. I had family and friends that cared about me. I had a relationship, and I had a good upbringing. I was, raised two parents that, loved and supported me, and I'm in a middle class family. And I didn't go through a lot of challenges growing up other than my parents' divorce, which, when I was young, and, it wasn't the best divorce as far as there was a lot of yelling. Then, it was definitely better once, they separated, to have that peace in the home, even though it's hard to have them, broken up, obviously, and to have to kind of split the time between my parents. But yeah, and so at the time I didn't really understand, why I was feeling this way. And I didn't tell anybody, even afterwards. I mean, I really only told my dad years later, until I ended up years later posting about it on Facebook. And so I had people that, friends from a long time ago say, wow, I had no idea, you always seem so happy. And so, usually it is the people I think that we don't suspect, and so when someone ends up killing themselves, I think a lot of times we ask ourselves, what were the warning signs, right? And I honestly don't think that there are sometimes, I know in my case, I don't think there would have been any warning signs, but, I ended up in an abusive relationship during that time. And that was actually one of the greatest gifts of my life, because it really helped me to see that I didn't love myself. I really didn't have that awareness before that point. And once I was in that relationship, I started reflecting and thinking, I must not love myself, because if I did, I wouldn't be in this relationship and I wouldn't continuously be in this relationship. And, when I would talk to my friends about it, they didn't understand why I was in the relationship, because they obviously thought it was amazing. They're like, why would you be with somebody that, treats you this way? But if you're not in that situation, it's hard to understand, or if you haven't been in that situation, because obviously, all of us have quote unquote good and bad aspects of us, right? So, and good and bad aspects of relationships. So it's not, if it was all bad, I think it would be a lot easier for people to walk away from those situations, right? But obviously there's good in there. And there's the emotional attachment, obviously, when you're in it, versus an outside perspective, it's a lot easier to say what you should do and to give advice. But then it was, so like I said, that was really the gift and the turning point for me. And then I ended up going to this seminar for this type of healing work that I do with my clients sometimes now, called Matrix Energetics. And it was actually through that abusive boyfriend. He introduced me to that work. We went to that seminar together. And it was through being there that I started to see things differently. I just started to open myself up to a whole different world, a different way of seeing the world and seeing myself, understanding myself and understanding who we are. That, I truly believe that we are spiritual beings having human experiences. We're not human beings having spiritual experiences. And so through that seminar, I started to see things differently, and it gave me the courage to finally end that relationship for good, because I was in that relationship on and off for 4.5 years. And so we just kept kind of playing the break up and get back together game, and then eventually it was like, no, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I also made the decision, realized that I needed to learn to love myself. And so I made the decision to end that relationship and to learn to love myself. And after I did that, the universe started bringing opportunities into my life to support me in that decision.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
I had a question. How did your depression manifest itself?
So I guess I would say, I was never actually diagnosed with depression. I didn't go see a therapist. I didn't take medication. That's why, I think you described, or in my bio, you shared that I healed naturally from it, because I definitely did not take medication, and not that medication can't be helpful or therapy can't be helpful for people. It wasn't my path. And what I did find was through community as well. That was a big piece of my healing, was to love myself through community. But for me, I was able, I guess you could say, maybe a functional depressive person. I did function, but I had a hard time getting out of bed. And I would just have thoughts like, when I would cross this bridge on the way to work, I would think, what would happen if I jumped off this bridge? And so I would have a hard time getting out of bed, but I still would get out of bed and I would still go to work and be able to function. It was this feeling that I had, and I couldn't even honestly imagine getting old, because I just couldn't see myself living that long. It was just so hard for me to think about getting old, because I'm like, I can't see past, I don't know, a year or this present moment very far, I don't know if that makes sense, if you've had those thoughts or that been in that space. But yeah.
I think that what you just described is so prevalent in our culture that we really have an opportunity here to help people, because what you described is what so many people experience every day. They go through it. So I don't think that there was anything abnormal about it. Those are normal feelings that we have. It's when we let them control us to the point where you can't get out of bed and you stop functioning, doing things and all that. We have these thoughts that go through our brain all the time. Being a veteran, and having all the challenges I had going through Vietnam, I saw a lot of guys that they would start doing things that were not safe and not putting thought into it. And because they were depressed and they didn't know how to handle the situation. So I think that what you described is really important. What I really want to focus on now is how you got out of that, how you healed yourself.
Right.
Because we all have to do that. We all have to do that every day because there's stuff that just goes on. It's life. And sometimes you want to throw the towel in. Sometimes you want to stand on top of the hill and cheer. Hopefully we have way more moments of cheering. One of the things that I want you to address too is you started at the end when you were talking about you couldn't see the future and you didn't see the future. I live in the moment because when you live in the moment, it's the only thing that you can control now. So for me, that is really important. You learned to live in the moment, or did you kind of meld looking forward and ahead? Did that keep you going?
Yeah. So I know that's kind of two different questions, but well, I don't know which one we want to talk about first. I think, so the first question around what helped me, so I know I said a little bit as far as the community piece, but yeah, there are several things that the universe brought into my life to really support me in learning to love myself. And it was actually through self-love that I was able to heal from the depression and suicidal thoughts, which you might think, like, how could that? Because most people that, when you think of someone being depressed, you probably think they're sad, they're not happy, and they should just be happy or something. And so but it's actually not about being sad. I heard someone say that one time that depression is anger turned inwards. So when you're depressed, you're actually not sad, you're angry at yourself, but you might not realize you're angry at yourself. I know that I didn't have that awareness at the time. And I projected it onto other people, and I thought people didn't care about me, which I think is the common thing, which is why maybe when people, if they do decide to end their life, that people can look at that and say, well, why were they, that's so selfish, but they're not even in a space to think of other people, right? They're just in so much pain that they just want to end their pain, and they may not even want to kill themselves and die, but they just don't want to feel the pain anymore. So I think because depression is anger turned inwards, then it would make sense that loving ourselves would be like the answer to that, right? So for me, it was actually when I shifted the focus to loving myself that I was able to then look back and realize that I wasn't feeling depressed anymore and I wasn't having those thoughts. So yeah, there were several things that supported me. One of the first things that helped me that I learned at the seminar was, and this is actually when I think about your show, and I was thinking about your name, Shower Epiphanies. And, I really love that name. I just wanted to share that because I think we had talked about this before, but I know that sometimes I'll have, when I'm sitting in meditation, I'll ask for guidance, and I don't usually get an answer in that moment, but then it usually comes like in the shower when you're not expecting it, right? All of a sudden something will come to me and I'll be like, oh, that's the answer. That's the great idea I was looking for or something. So of course, sometimes it's hard to then, I'm not so good at like writing those things down. So to remember or, to say, okay, this happened in the shower, but I love that name because that is totally what I think of, and I've had that experience. But yeah, so I think that one of the epiphanies that I had was I realized that I had these beliefs that were putting conditions on my happiness. So there were a couple beliefs in particular that I was having. One was that if I just got married, I'd be happier. And the other belief was that if I was single, I'd be miserable. And so I just started to question those beliefs. I said, well, how do I know that being married is going to make me happier? I mean, there's a 50% divorce rate in our country. So there's probably a lot of people that are married that are not happy, right? There's no guarantee that when you get married, you're going to be happy, right? And then how do I know that being single is going to make me miserable? What if being single was the best thing that I ever did? And so I had this fear of being alone, of being single. I had gone from one long relationship to another. I had this like pattern of going from one relationship to another and really staying in relationships longer than I should have, not being really happy, but just being afraid of being alone. That, went back to my childhood. So when I started questioning those beliefs, it really just gave me the courage to then it just created space for me to think of a different possibility that maybe this belief I had wasn't actually true, right? That just because I had this belief didn't make it true. And so by questioning those beliefs, I was able to then, it really gave me the courage to end that relationship. So that's a really powerful practice that kind of just came to me. I don't know that, it was in that kind of space of the healing work and that seminar I went to, but I think that I just kind of came up with those practice. And then a couple other things that were really supportive as well. I found this Facebook group called 100 Days of Self-Love. And so every day I would post one thing that I loved about myself in that group, and I would write in my journal. Sometimes I'd post it on my personal page as well. And that's really powerful because, doing anything, when you do it consistently over time, then it's going to yield results and actually shift the way that we think, because so many of us are not so kind to ourselves, right? Like we have negative thoughts about ourselves. We put ourselves down and we're so much more mean to ourselves than we would be to anybody else, right? And so to start shifting that, and so that hopefully becomes more of an automatic to think positively about ourselves, right? But that's not something that comes overnight. With that practice to recognize that, we already do love things about ourselves now. It's not something that we don't already have, and to start with what we already do love, because there's probably things that are easy for us to love now. So maybe it's physical traits, maybe it's our eyes, maybe it's our hair, maybe, whatever, or maybe it's a personality trait. But there's something that we already love about ourselves, right? To start with those things. And then the goal is to eventually get to a place where you can love not just the quote unquote good aspects, but really like the shadow aspects of ourselves, right? Because I think that I do believe that loving ourselves means that we do love all of us, right? So not just the parts that are easy for us to love, but the parts that are more difficult, the parts that maybe we don't want people to know about us, right? To embrace that and to say like, that makes me who I am, and to know that like all pieces of us are welcome and needed, and that there is, that they do all serve a purpose. And then another practice that really supported me was another Facebook group I found called What Am I Grateful For Today? So kind of similarly, I would write down one thing I was grateful for, at least one thing every day, and also post it in the group. Again, that just shifts our mindset, because when you're depressed, a lot of times you think you're focusing on what's missing in your life, right? Rather than what you have to be grateful for. So when we start to look at what do I have to be grateful for today, obviously we get more to be grateful for. And it's amazing too. It just really is a great reminder that no matter what's going on in our lives, no matter how shitty our lives look or feel, like there's always something to be grateful for, right? And it can even just the most basic, being able to, be with you right now, right? Like it's amazing what technology has given us the ability to do, and have shelter and food and clothing. So many things that people in the world don't have, to really appreciate what we have.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you talked about there was mindset. And I believe that having mindfulness about what we're wanting and what our condition is, and I call it mindful perspective of self. And when you have that and you start focusing and having gratitude for all the good things about you, it does change you. It absolutely does. And what I love is that you had the skill to actually see it and apply it, because that's what a lot of people do. A lot of reading on self-help books, and they read and they read and they read, but they don't apply it and they don't start using it. And for you to do that, it's very commendable. And I love you for it, because it really shows your strength of character and your focus on wanting to improve yourself. And that's what we're all wanting for each other. We all want each other to be better. So when we do interact with each other, we can do it honestly, fruitfully, and with compassion and love and everything else. So,
well, thank you. And I just wanted to share one thing about that with the 100 Days of Self-Love, was just that I actually, to be honest, when I found that group, and I wasn't like trying to find 100 things to love about myself at the time, felt like a big stretch, right? I was like, I don't know if there are 100 things to love about myself. Like that felt like a huge thing that I didn't know that I could do, but I was willing to give it a shot. So, if you're maybe listening right now and you're thinking, yeah, I don't think I could find 100 things to love about myself, I challenge you to give it a shot, because you'll probably find what I found. And I actually did it for more than 100 days. I did it for over 365. I don't actually remember the number of days, but I just kept going with it. And what I found is that there's really an infinite number of things to love about myself. And I believe the same is true for all of us. So that was one thing I wanted to share, is just that was something that was a big stretch for me at the time, being really depressed in the state I was in. I really didn't think that was really possible, but I was willing to give it a shot. And the other thing is with the community aspect. I think it is so important, even in that setting, it was a virtual community, but being able to be a part of a group where everybody is on the same journey, everyone's there to learn to love themselves and to be grateful. I think that there's so much power in group energy, right? And people coming together, they call it the synergy, where 1 + 1 does not equal 2, it equals 3 or 4. It's so much bigger what the sum of the whole than the individual parts. So yeah, there is power in community. And I think that's another thing when it comes to depression, where that makes it so hard too, is that people tend to isolate themselves, right? They tend to not reach out for support. And I know that it's not easy when you're in that space. I know it wasn't easy for me. And like I said, I didn't even share it with anybody in my family or my friends. Nobody knew. But these communities I found online really supported me. So to know that if you're in that space, that you can find communities, it doesn't have to be in person. It can be virtual if that feels safer. Women's circles, like in-person circles, was also something that helped me in my journey as well. And asking for support was a big thing, right? To reach out and to recognize that I can't do it alone, and that we're really not meant to do anything. Like, why do we have a culture, especially here in the US, that I think is very focused on being independent and doing things yourself, right? Versus the fact that in other cultures, they do a lot of more things together as a collective, right? And a tribe. And to know that I believe that's how we're meant to live is communities, not like a solo,
I agree. And I think that what happens within our culture is that it becomes safer to isolate than it does to be a community. And, with what's going on in our country right now, with the political divisiveness that there is, it's driving people more and more that way, because I know I have friends who will not go interact with people because they're afraid that they're going to say something that it is. And that brings me to the word fear. And when you fear is isolating. It isolates you. And you've got to have the expectation that everything's going to be all right. I talk about faith a lot, and faith not being in the religious sense, but being in the sense of just that no matter what goes on and what happens, we're always going to be okay if we think we're going to be okay. If we don't think we're going to be okay, we're not going to be okay. So I always encourage people who are showing any signs of depression or anxiety that they got to get out there and challenge those anxieties, and they got to challenge the depression. And the only way you can do that is through community and going out. And it's kind of like Pavlov's dog. Once you start doing it and you get that reward of interaction, and you get a little bit more reward each time you go out.
Right.
It helps you.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I wanted to say. One was what you shared about how it's safer to be, I remember the exact way you said it, but like basically to be alone versus to be in a community, right? That it's safer for us. And I actually would say, I don't think that that's true. I think that may be a perceived safeness, because I think really like if we're able to be a part of a community, and I think that when we live that way, that, being in a circle, the circles I've been blessed to be part of, what I've experienced is, well, for one thing, obviously just understanding that when I'm in circles with other women, I find that all the things that I thought were quote unquote wrong about me or different about me, that it's not, right? Like you realize that maybe all the thoughts you have in your head, that somebody else has those thoughts too. Maybe you thought you were the only one. I know that I, used to think, wow, I have this crazy person in my head and everyone else must be normal, right? Like I'm the one that has these crazy thoughts. But then you hear other people say what you always thought in your head, and you realize, wow, I'm not the only one that has these thoughts, So it definitely makes you feel less alone when you are able to find those communities. And also, I think that when we're in those communities, then it's like any issue that there is, like there's already the answers in that community. Pull all of our resources, all of our gifts, everything that we've got. I think that everything is available when we come together.
I think that what I was saying is exactly what you just said. But I think what I was trying to put across is that when people isolate themselves, their thought is that they're protecting themselves, that's comfortable. Mm-hmm. Not that it's healthy, but that in their minds, they're saying, okay, I'm safe. I'm safe because there's nothing that can hurt me. No one can hurt me because I'm alone, which is the furthest thing from the truth about healing yourself. It's in their head. They see it as that. It's a perception that is incorrect. So.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And then the other thing I wanted to add was that self-love, like I shared, has definitely been a big part of my journey with healing myself from the depression, suicidal thoughts. But the other thing that really helped was living my purpose. So I believe that it's both pieces. And that's why, sometimes we see these people that, celebrities, and seem like they're living their purpose and thinking maybe, and it seems like, wow, they have it all, right? They've got the fame, they've got the money, they've got all these things, and yet they killed themselves. Like, why did that happen? And I can't say, like, I don't know the whole, story. So I don't know if there was drugs involved in that. I think that definitely can play a part in it. Mm-hmm. But it could also be that, especially when you're in such the public eye like that there can be a lot of pressure, right, to be a certain way. And it's really hard to then admit that you're struggling, right? So maybe they weren't really loving themselves in sharing their struggle, obviously. So I think I know for me that both of those pieces were really critical for me in my journey. So just know that you're listening and you're thinking, well, maybe you do love yourself, but you still don't, feel like something is missing, that to consider, like, are you doing what you're here to do? Because I do believe that we all have a unique purpose, that we all have gifts that we're here to share with the world. And honestly, if we all were able to just focus on that, the world would be a much better place, right? Like, I think it can be so easy to, especially when we're empathic and we care about the world, to get overwhelmed by the world, right? Because there's so much going on in the world, and to think like, what can I do and how can I solve all these issues? And to know that I don't think it's actually our job to fix all these problems. Just focus on what you're here to do, because if we all did that, I think everything would be so much better, right? Because we are designed to do something. You have a unique purpose that you're here to do.
Live up to your own expectations. I mean, that's really what it is, because, when you live up to the expectations of others, you're not living you're not living. You're living through them, not yourself. So that's why it's so important to set your expectations at your core of what you want, what your purpose is. And I do a lot of work with that with people on identifying what they want and how to get there through their expectations, because we see, like I was saying before, we see our expectations through faith and fear. When you have the faith that everything's always going to work out. I say it to my kids all the time, and I say it to my clients all the time. Today is going to be okay. Tomorrow is going to be even better. As long as we keep having the higher expectations at our core and we keep meeting them, things will always work out. It's when you get other people's expectations thrown into it and you try to live to them, you don't live your life.
Right.
And that's sad.
Yeah. And I think there was a couple things that I was going to share, and I hope I can remember them now. I wanted to get, I was like, I want to get back to that, because I know there was the other question you asked about. That was a really good question about like whether, I found myself, I think, focusing more at the future or being able to live more in the present. And I think that, I did. I think through my journey, and I have found that I definitely think when we focus on the present moment, it's really hard to be anything but happy, because unless something just really did piss you off in that moment, like otherwise, usually if we're in the past, we're focusing on something we're sad about, regret, like something that maybe happened in the past that we wish maybe it was a relationship that we're still holding on to, or, it's like something from the past. You can look back and be happy about the past. I'm not saying you can't do that, but a lot of times, we might be feeling sadness or regret in the past. And then when we're focusing on the future, we can feel a lot of anxiety around the future, right? Because it's something that isn't here yet. So that's why I think being in the present moment is so important. Like you said, that's all we have. And I went to a retreat where the retreat's called Present Moment, because the woman that co-founded it, she needed that reminder for herself, right? To be in the present. And that place is just, the energy there is amazing. They have Wi-Fi, but you don't even want to be on it when you're there. You just want to be there. And it's on the beach, and it's just this beautiful place. But really the energy is what makes it so special. So I definitely agree with you that. And then, of course, it is a practice, right? I can't say I'm 100% perfect at being in the moment all the time, but it's something that just continual thing to come back to. And I actually found for me, when I started taking Latin and ballroom dancing lessons, I did that for 3 years. And actually, one of the things I realized was, I thought, why do I love this so much? And one of the things I realized is that actually, I think when I'm dancing, that is like pretty much actually the only thing, or very few of the things that I ever do where I'm really in the moment, where it actually kind of forces me to be in the moment. Because if I try to think about the moves, I'm going to be behind the music and the beat, right? So I literally can't think and move my body quick enough. Like my body, if I allow my body to just do what it knows it needs to do, trust that my body knows what to do. And of course, it also, being the woman, it's a lot easier, because if you have a guy that can lead you and know what he's doing, and as long as you know how to allow him to lead, which is not easy as women, let's be honest. A lot of us like to be the leaders, like to be in control. And so it is hard to let somebody lead. But if you can allow that person to lead and be a good follower, then it's, really easy as the woman then to just enjoy being in the moment. And so that's what I realized, that's why I love it so much, is because it actually forces me to be in the moment. And when I'm in the moment, there's really not a lot other than joy to experience.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
That's why it's so important for people that are experiencing depression to get doing something, because it takes your mind away from the negative part of it and puts it back into the moment, which is always positive. What's ever going on right there is where at least it should be positive. And physical activity is so important for part of the healing process of depression. To go out and do ballroom dancing, go out bowling, go out running, jogging, go to the gym and work out. That's why therapists always suggest it, because it brings you to the moment. It's hard to think negative thoughts when you're ballroom dancing or you're bowling. You got to focus, or baseball or basketball or any physical activity. So that's important.
And it's also things that are fun for you though, right? Because honestly, I was actually working with a trainer. I was exercising, regularly. I was going to do yoga and I was going to meditate and I was still feeling depressed. And I know like everyone's journey is different. I know a friend who said yoga saved her life. It really helped her through her depression. But for me, that didn't actually work. It was these mindset pieces in the community. It was all these other aspects. With that, combined, I think that really supported me. But I agree that doing something that makes you happy, that brings you joy. My happy place is the beach. So, I'm fortunate enough now to be able to go anytime. When I was in Chicago, this was when I was feeling depressed. I was in Chicago. And so it's a lot harder to access the beach physically on a regular basis. But definitely, do things that bring you joy. And I remember the other thing I was going to say was when you were talking before about fear and faith, that I think I definitely agree that we create our reality through our expectations, right? And what we believe, and whether we believe everything works out or not. But also that when you're living from that place of faith, it doesn't mean you're not going to have fear, right? Because we're still human. Of course, you're going to still feel fear. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm going to decide to have faith, therefore I'm not going to have fear, but it's like with the faith, that means that you're going to experience the fear. So it's not a matter of not ever wanting to feel fear, because that's just not possible, right? So it's not that we're not going to feel the fear. It's just not letting it stop us, right? Saying, okay, I recognize there's fear here and I'm just going to keep going, right? Because I know that I believe that, what I'm doing is worth the fear, right? So, and I truly think that when I look at my life and the things that I've done, that really the moments where I felt the most alive were the moments where I had a lot of fear up till that point of whatever it was I was doing, right? So I really think that this feeling of being alive comes from us being out of our comfort zone, right? Doing things that stretch us, that take us out of what feels comfortable. And honestly, it's not an easy thing, because I think we are so wired for comfort, right? Like we want to be comfortable, right? How many of us would purposely make the temperature in our house really cold or hot? Like we always try to do things to be comfortable. We want to feel comfortable, right? But that's not how we feel alive.
Well, yeah, I think that the greater the challenges that we have, the more rewarding it is to us and our psyche. If we always lived in comfort, we wouldn't get much accomplished. I mean, we wouldn't do any personal growth, because the most growth that I've ever experienced are through the most challenging times that I've had. 9 years old when I was abandoned, in Vietnam, and the loss of my wife in 2006 to ovarian cancer. I mean, all extremely challenging points of my life. But I learned so much about life and living, and it gave me such strength and perspective to live in the moment. And I mean, it's hard for me to even verbalize everything that I learned, experiences that I've had. Because I believe everything that we do in life is meant to teach us lessons. And it's when we shut those lessons out that we do the most harm to ourselves. When we take them, and every one of those experiences I just mentioned, I look at as a learning experience. It was an experience for me to learn something about myself, about others, and move on and just live. I'm going to do that until the day I die. I mean,
right. Yeah, I agree.
I just want to live.
And I agree. I definitely think everything that we experience, that there's a lesson there. And I think the truth is that if we try to shut out the lesson, in my experience, it just keeps coming back, right? It might show up in other ways, like in different ways with the universe. It's like it actually really wants to support us in growing, right, in our evolution. And so if we don't learn a lesson, as I don't know about you, but I know I've had that experience, right, where you're like, something happens and then something happens again. And you're like, why does this keep happening? Because there's obviously a lesson here that you haven't gotten, right? And so you have to get the lesson. And once you do, that's how you know you've gotten the lesson, when something doesn't keep kind of showing up.
I was just thinking when you said that, I was trying to think back in my life. What is there that I have not learned from and had it repeat itself? And, I can't think of anything because I do look at everything as a learning experience. And maybe that's why it doesn't repeat itself.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Because I will say, I can't say that I haven't had lessons repeat themselves. But I think that, that's to know that if that is happening, that just means that and also that I believe growth is a spiral, that it's not a linear process. So it's not just from like point A to point B, and it's not a straight line. It's a spiral, which means that you'll end up probably coming back to places where you feel like, wait, I thought I healed this, right? And it doesn't mean that the work that you've done didn't work. It just means there's another layer, right? There's more layers to uncover. And so I think that, I had a mentor that shared that with me. And I think that's really true. I do believe that growth is a spiral. It's not a linear process. So I know that's been my experience in my life where things have, kind of come back around. And I think, wow, like I thought I learned this already, but I did, there's more that's coming up for healing, and it's just an opportunity to look at it. And you mentioned earlier, like with my TEDx talk, I mean, that definitely was the next level thing for me to do. And that brought up, like I posted on my Facebook page when I was getting ready for my talk, just all that came up around that for me, and how it was really my talk was about self-love. And it was really an opportunity to love myself more, and to see how, really not, I could have gone one of two ways, right? I could have either like let that defeat me and go, yeah, who am I to do this? And honestly, I was close to just saying, you know what, like calling these people and saying, I'm sorry, but I can't do this. You got the wrong person. I'm not the person to do this, to be honest. Like it was one of those things that brought up so much stuff around like, my life's not perfect. I still struggle. Like, who am I to give this talk? But then I had to say, wait, this is my purpose. I know that I'm here to teach and embody self-love, that this has been my journey. And I know that there is no destination, that it's not about being perfect. It's not about having a perfect life. It's not about never struggling. And it's actually, that is part of the message, is that, when we love ourselves, that it's an ongoing process, that there's still moments where we're going to struggle. And that's what the tools are there for, right? And to know that like it's a never ending process. So it was actually really beautiful and even though it didn't feel good in the moment, of course, but to go through that process and to recognize that, wow, like this is all part of my message to share with people, right? And that this is happening so that I can love myself even more, to show more compassion for myself, and to realize like, no, of course, this is what I'm here to do, that I am. If I wasn't meant to do this, I wouldn't have gotten to talk, right? And sometimes we have to honestly borrow other people's belief, right? We may not have our own belief in ourselves, and to know that, okay, well, these people that chose me to be the speaker at their event, that they believe in me, right? So even if I'm not believing in myself in this moment, I'm going to borrow their belief, because I don't think that they would have somebody on the stage that's not going to do a good job, right? Because then it looks bad on them. And so they have faith in me, even though they barely even know me, but from what they saw, my application, what I sent to them, that they have enough faith in me to know that I can do it. And truly, I knew deep down that I could, but there was a lot of, on the surface that I had to kind of clear up before I could get there.
Wasn't your trip from San Diego, where was it that you went to your TEDx? Where did you do it at?
To Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Didn't you have flight delays or something that really, I followed
it? Yes, it was a journey. I could tell a whole talk about that. But I don't know if, like the whole thing around does the universe test us, like whether you believe in that or not. But if that's true, I mean, the universe was definitely testing my commitment to my purpose. And because it was a journey. I mean, literally a physical, like, I traveled for almost 24 hours on 4 hours of sleep, and I barely had any coffee. I was trying to not drink coffee because I try not to drink coffee, but I did have to get a matcha latte, I will admit, at Starbucks at the airport, just to hold me over, because I was afraid I would fall asleep and miss my flight, because I had a 7-hour delay in Chicago. And thank goodness for free Wi-Fi, so I was able to catch up on some shows, because I tried to look over my talk and my mind was just like, this is not happening. On 4 hours of sleep, my mind could not process anything. But yeah, it was one of those journeys where I was, and as you saw, you're following it. I know so many people were rallying for me, and that was so helpful, because I was like, you know what, another opportunity to ask for support, right? Like I could just try to do this on my own and trust that, and I know I'm powerful and that I have powerful angels that would support me, but I was like, why do this on my own? Because I know that collective energy is so powerful. And so why not reach out and tell people what's going on and get the support? Because again, at the end of the day, what I always come back to, and it's not about me, right? It's so easy. And I think that's another thing when it comes to depression, is that we end up focusing so much on ourselves. So when we're living our purpose, to remember that it's not about you, right? It's a continuous thing too. I think for me, especially, I always come back to that place of when I'm struggling, what am I focusing on? Because most likely I'm focusing on myself, right? When I'm focusing on others, I feel like there's less struggles there because I don't know. It's just like, it's so much easier when I shift the focus, when I recognize that this talk is not about me. This is about the people that need it, right? So when I can focus on that, then it's like anything that comes, any challenges, like it clears the path really, right? It's like, okay, well, even though these things are coming up, I'm focused, I'm committed because this is not about me, because I know there's somebody out there that my talk could potentially save their life, right? Because that's what it did for me, that self-love and living my purpose in these practices saved my life. So that's the power in this talk. And to be able to know that, and really I had to come to a place of surrender though, because there was all these flight cancellations and delays and things that were out of my control that I had to say, you know what, God, I put this in your hands. If I'm meant to be there, I will. And if not, I mean, I can only do so much, right? Like you can only sort of fight and resist what is so much until at some point we have to surrender and say, leave it to God, right? Like God knows, I believe God's got our best interests in heart. And so if I'm meant to be there, I will. And I kind of had to just get to that place of the full surrender.
That's called faith.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And I think I can't say I had the faith. It was a test for sure. So.
Oh yeah. Well, our faith gets tested, golly, thousands of times a day, probably for people, especially when you are out in community, it's tested quite often. And your strength of character to see your faith through is what defines you, makes you who you are. What makes you so special? What makes me so special? That's what makes you so special.
Oh, I thought you were asking me the question. I was like, okay.
Well, there's a good question. What makes you so special?
That is a good question. It's like that.
I can tell you what I think.
Okay. I was like, well, the obvious answer is, well, of course, it's just who I am because I am special. We're all special. But I know I have a big heart. I know that ever since I was a child, I just knew that I was here for something bigger than myself. And I share this sometimes on shows, and I'm like, I don't know if that sounds cheesy, but honestly, and I don't even know where it came from. It's just something that I've always had inside of me, I guess, from a child. And I just always knew that, I wasn't here just to make a lot of money and to have fun with my life, but to really make an impact on the world. So I think that makes me pretty special.
Do you know what I was going to say made you special?
What's that?
Your heart.
Yeah, I had a feeling it was similar.
When I first met you, and I've talked to you over time now, it has just solidified in my mind that you have this beautiful heart and spirit about you. And when you have that, it shows in your sparkle of a smile. It shows in the sparkle of your eyes. It just becomes your persona, who you are. And people sense that. At least I sensed it. I can't speak for other people. I sense that, but I think if I sense it, other people sense it too. That is the beautiful thing about Joie Cheng, is her heart. And I mean, that's awesome. That's why you can help people, because you're willing to share it. You're willing to share that heart. Because a lot of people live in that fear space and don't share their heart. If we all shared our heart as much as you and I do, our world would function at a whole different place. But people go out and they function at this level of to the expectations of others. They think that we have to perform. Instead of just being themselves, we have to perform to what they think people want us to be. And you see it every day. You see it in the workplace. You see it in all over. Doesn't matter where you go. You see it all over. And that's when we speak from our heart. Even I get along with people who even don't express their heart in a positive way, because I see through it and I can address it. And one of the things people say about me is you always be able to draw people out and you always make people smile. It's because I can see it. I can see when they're hurt and they're dealing in anger, and I can see it. And I want to make them feel better, and I want them to feel good about themselves. So I draw them out and they talk to me. We go to New York City and I get on the subway. I cannot not talk to people. People think I'm weird, but I start talking to people, and pretty soon I'm talking to 3 or 4 people and we're all talking, and it changes the whole thing. It just, you see people start smiling and moving and just enjoying, relaxing. So.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard, I forget who said this, but that everything is either love or like a cry for love, right? Or so there's only 2 emotions, love and fear. But the fear is still like I think a cry for love.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
Yeah, I think that every human being craves two things. One is to be heard, and then the other is for validation. So I call it love and validation. People want to be loved and heard and want to be validated for their thoughts and actions. Mm-hmm. And those are the two human traits that are craved the most by people. And if you can meet that in people, you can win them over. Make them love them and just validate their feelings. And it comes through listening and all those things. So
yeah, and I agree. And I think that's why, being in a circle of people is so powerful. That's exactly the experience that I received being in circles, was that it was an opportunity to be heard, right? To finally be able to share whatever was on my mind and not have people judge me. Or if they did, at least they did it silently. But they were just there holding space and really just allowing me to speak what's on my mind without feedback, without advice, without any comments, really just holding space. And then, we would do this thing where we just put our hands out and sending that person love, right? And so it was a way of saying, I hear you, I see you, I love you, without saying those words. And so, yeah, I agree that validation and love is what we all want. And, we're all here to have and see.
It is. Well, this is I guess a great way to kind of start learning about what you're up to and what you're going to do, because we're getting near our time of having to say goodbye to each other and to our audience. So what have you got coming up? Where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best place would be my website, joiecheng.com. That's JOIECHENG.com. And right now I've got clients I'm working on, helping them share their story to publish their book. Because like you said, I think in my bio that I believe when we share stories that we heal ourselves and we heal the world. And it's so true. I think that the greatest thing that we can do to leave an impact on the world is to share a story and to share them in the form of a book. Because that way, whenever we're no longer in the physical form, because we're all going to end up, transitioning at some point. And we really don't know when that is. And so I think that a lot of times it's so easy for us to think, well, I'll do it later and I'll have someday. But like you said, it's all the present moment is all we have, right? So not to wait for someday, because your life could literally end in a moment, right? I've had friends die in car accidents immediately, right? And it doesn't matter how old you are. And so to know that leaving your legacy is so important, because eventually we won't be around in our family and our friends, anybody that knew us, and to be able to leave something that could literally change someone's life and have the power and even save that person, someone else's life long after you're gone. To leave that is so, there aren't even really words to describe the feeling, but it's just, there's such a freedom and a peace in knowing that when I die, I'm going to feel like, wow, okay, I've left an impact on the world that's going to live on forever. And so that's my passion. That's what I believe. I'm here to help people, to support them in getting their story out. And one of the things that is coming up for me is destination writing retreats, because I've been thinking about how I know I've gone through so many trainings and I have so many gifts. I've done a yoga teacher training. I've led Diksha blessing circles, my healing work I do, meditation, women's circles. So to be able to really bring everything together, as well as combine that with my love for travel. And I think that there is just something really powerful about being able to meet with people again, meet in a group setting within a shared intention to share a story and to meet somewhere in a beautiful space out in nature, which is so healing too, right? That's also been a part of my journey, is being out in nature. But to do that and to have that just space to be able to create, to write, get our books done. Yeah. So I have a whole list of places. Basically, my goal and dream is to be able to do my bucket list items. I actually was going to travel for 9 months to 25 countries. And so basically to just take all those places that I want to go and have people meet me and get our books done. So we have to look forward to.
That's really great. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better about what we live for. I really couldn't have. And it's been a pleasure having you. And we're going to have to do this again sometime. And I'm always here to support you as I am my audience. I'm always here for you guys. And just, you can get a hold of me at expectationtherapy.com. And I'm just going to let Heather White take us out of here and say, Joy, it's been a joy. I mean, I just love you to death and always here for you. So Heather White, go ahead and take us away.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.